Hey, so I spent the past few hours hacking together a simple map editor for my video game made in raylib. Let's take a look. So we're greeted with an empty world, and we can see we've got this 3D building that snaps to this ground plane. I can right-click to place a building, and I've got a couple building types. We've got the tall building, small building, and medium building. No shaders yet, so it's just grayscale for simplicity's sake. We got a bit of wide playing area. Much of this is still in the early phase, but when we're happy with this, I can just close my game, and if I boot it back up, we can see that we have the exact same map that we just created. And I can also pick these buildings in 3D thanks to the powerful ray box intersection algorithm. And yeah, just to prove that still works, boot it one more time. And there we go. We're greeted with much more barren level. So yeah, the code for this is only about 200 lines. I probably don't even need this notion of an editor building, but my game world has a definitive building struct, so just sort of creating some separation for that. We've got some data needed to render them along with a position. They've got an ID, so I can search for them within an array. Then I'm using binary files to save and load them. I believe raylib doesn't have support for binary files. Lots of text utilities, but once you understand binary files, I just find it's easier to think with binary files. So right now it's super primitive, just saving the type, so I know what mesh to map them to, and of course their 3D position. Couple globals because I'm lazy, F meaning file scope, so we've got the notion, a pointer to our selected building, all the buildings we're working with, sort of our ray ground intersection that I've just called cursor, and the type of the currently selected building. Simple function to search through all buildings and remove it if the current building ID matches that of the selected building, provided we have a building selected in our first place. Perform the removal, nullify selected. I've got a couple lifecycle callback functions, really just load, unload, update, and draw. So you could just do this out of the box in default raylib that maps one-to-one. So I load my binary file. Don't need to go over how binary files work, but basically I store the amount of buildings, and then I store an array of building binaries, which again is just the building specific data like type and position. Then I transform that into what I can conveniently use to render the building. I make them all grayscale. I give them their own meshes and material, all that good stuff, and then save is basically the same thing. See how many buildings there are in the scene, and then dump only the relative information to the binary structure and write that entire thing as an array. Perform that in load and unload. Currently no support to change the file since it's just an internal tool. I'm going to change it manually in my code if I want a new map. Now, update is probably the most important function. Just some internal code to update my custom camera. But from there, we hand control over to raylib. So given our mouse position and our camera, where does that ray map to our game world? And we've got just some mouse events. So I decided if I press left, we're going to try and select a building with the scene. So it's not optimized right now. I just do a brute force loop because it's an editor, doesn't need real-time performance. And moreover, the mesh bounding box function is also brute force. It just loops through all the vertices of a mesh, determining their minimums and maximums. So could cache it, but don't need to right now. And yeah, I just apply the building positions to their bounding box. Otherwise, all buildings would be stored at the origin effectively. And yeah, we just query raybox. If there's a hit, then I store a pointer to it, update my potentially previously selected and new selected to have their gray versus green colors. I call the aforementioned remove selected function. If I press delete, I've got the extents of my world. I can see I've got sort of X and Y as my ground plane. My camera is just looking down the Z axis. and same powerful raylib function to query the same cursor ray against this just defined ground plane. So we figure out where that hits. Lots of cool projection math going on internally here. And yeah, so that 3D cursor is just a point along the ground plane where you saw that blue building mapping to. And additionally, assuming we've intersected with the ground plane and we click right, well, then we're just gonna spawn a building. And then just some buttons to cycle my building. I think I've got like, yeah, just 3 possible building types and this nice little trick to tell you the amount of values in your enum, because we've got 0, 1, and 2, meaning we have 3 unique types total in that enum. And yeah, then I just have this little for loop to update the diffuse map because I don't like typing all of this out, so I just add a little bit of extra data and store the color directly within buildings to make my life easier. And then for rendering, this is like epitome of laziness. I made a default material so I could just render the currently selected building. And yeah, I just use RLGL directly to draw a grid, because out of the box, it only works on the XZ plane, I believe. And then yeah, do my buildings again with just very, very simple code. And yeah, that's a summary of my editor. Hope you enjoyed. Shout out to raylib.